Well, hello everybody, and thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us tonight. I'm Diana Gasperni. I am the founder of Be.WELL Psychotherapy, and it is my pleasure to have this month's wellness talk hosted by Suhaili Nunez. Suhaili is new to us, and she is just kicking ass and taking names. So I'm really excited to have her on board. And she has a really exciting is probably not the right word, but very interesting and informative and very just really insightful conversation tonight around imposter syndrome. So Suhaili, please, I am going to duck out and welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Hi,
Hi,
good
good
evening,
evening,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much
much
for
for
taking
taking
time out
time
of
out
your
of your
day and
day and
joining us
joining us
tonight.
tonight.
I am
I am
going to
going
be
to be
sharing
sharing
my
my
slides
slides
in
in
just
just
a
a
second.
second.
Okay, so hopefully you all can see. Okay. So what I am going to be talking about during this wellness talk today is an oh so common experience. And this is known as the imposter phenomenon. Am I a fraud? Hopefully you all can see the screen right now. So before I get into, the details and what this is, I'm going to be sharing a little bit about my professional background, okay? So I am a licensed mental health counselor. I'm an LMHC, and I currently work full-time at Be.WELL Psychotherapy as a psychotherapist, and I am also an adjunct professor at Hunter College. And I teach for their counseling graduate programs for mental health counseling, school counseling, and rehabilitation counseling. I've worked in different settings. Before working at Be.WELL, I worked as a therapist for a non-for-profit behavioral health organization where we worked with the underserved population. And then before that, I spent about a couple of years at a hospital as their depression manager. And then I was the clinician for the male floor of a chemical dependency treatment center. Speaking of treatment, how I like to approach it is I tend to combine psychodynamic therapy and CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. I do consider myself eclectic in the sense that I kind of take bits and pieces of different orientations and theories, whatever works for my client, but that's what I gravitate towards most. And I work with my clients to increase their insight and help them better navigate through any personal challenges that they may be having. Okay, so what is the imposter phenomenon, right? The term that I'm going to be using most of the time during this wellness talk is imposter phenomenon. Some of you may have been introduced to this kind of concept through other terms such as imposter syndrome, which tends to be the most commonly used term. Fraud syndrome, intellectual fraud, imposter experience, or imposterism. Okay, there's no right or wrong, whatever you feel most comfortable using. But basically what it is when an individual starts to struggle with feelings of imposterism. So they start to think and believe that they're not competent or they're not as intelligent as other people may think. So they struggle with internalizing their success. So instead of attributing their success to their hard work, their accomplishments, and their achievements, they tend to attribute it to external factors, right? So it was because of luck, by chance, or I just worked really hard to get it, right? And they tend to believe that they're undeserving of recognition and praise that they oftentimes get for these achievements, which leads to them fearing that they're going to be exposed. Eventually, their secret's going to be out. Someone's going to find out that they don't really know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're doing. And because of this, they go to great lengths to avoid failure. And the ironic part about this is that many people who struggle with the phenomenon tend to be very intelligent and very accomplished, right? But an important word that I want to use is perceived. So you perceive yourself to be an imposter. It doesn't mean that you actually are. If any of what I'm saying is ringing true or sounds familiar, you can go on Dr. Pauline Rose Clance's website. So she's actually the psychologist who coined the term and kind of pioneered these studies. The link is right here. You can go on her website. It's not a test for a diagnosis. You don't need any credentials to administer it. It's just a 20-question simple questionnaire. You answer the questions, and it just gives you a better understanding to these imposter feelings that you're having in terms of how frequent you're having them and how intense you're having them. And then it's up to you to decide what do you want to do with those results, right? If you want to talk about it, if you want to seek help. So here, this is kind of the imposter cycle. This is what it looks like. And this was depicted in Dr. Clance's research. So you see in the top left corner, it starts with an achievement-related task, right? So there's something pressing that presents itself, and there's a task at hand that you're expected to accomplish, right? That's going to contribute to feelings of anxiety, self-doubt, and worry. Am I going to be able to accomplish this? Do I know how to do this correctly? And then what happens is it breaks off into over-preparation or procrastination, right? So when we're thinking about how we're going to go about managing this task, we procrastinate because we're paralyzed with that anxiety, and we're paralyzed with the worry and the doubt. Or we over-prepare because we think that's the only possible way that we'll be able to accomplish this task, right? And then most of the time we accomplish that task and we have a brief feeling of relief, right? We accomplish the task, it's out of the way, but it's brief because it's a cycle. There's always going to be a next task that's going to increase that anxiety and trigger those feelings of worry and self-doubt. So what we see happens is when we get that positive feedback, which oftentimes we get because you did a good job, we discount it, so it goes back to that. We don't internalize it. We attribute it to something other than our skill set. Okay, so I got lucky because I procrastinated, or it was just due to the effort that I put into it. Okay, and then that kind of perpetuates these feelings of I'm a fraud. Right? They're going to find out that I only achieved this because I got lucky or because I just put so much work and effort into this. Increase self-doubt, and then we're back at the next achievement-related task, right? So it's insidious, it's a cycle unless we intervene somehow. The initial study, which was done a long time ago in 1978, it was done with 150 women, and these women were middle to upper class white women. And they aimed to answer the question, why do these women who were very intelligent, they had PhDs, a master's degree, they were in medical school, they were lawyers, they were therapists, they were quote unquote bright, but despite all of these accomplishments and the accolades that they had and the recognition that they received from their community, they continued to perceive themselves as an imposter, right? So they wanted to learn, why does this happen? Where does this come from? And we learned a lot from that study, and there's so much more research that has begun after that. One of the things that we learned, and I see this happen so often with my clients, is we see a correlation between these feelings of feeling like an imposter and family dynamics, okay? So oftentimes we see that these individuals who struggle with these feelings, they come from a family where education is highly emphasized. Okay, so education is highly emphasized, or what I like to call, you're in a situation in your family where you're competing against your sibling or competing against yourself. So what do I mean by that? Oftentimes we have an individual who struggles with feeling like an imposter, and they have a sibling, right? Oftentimes it's an older sibling, and they're identified as the intelligent child. That's the child that is the smart one. They got everything going for themselves. The frustrating part is that most of the time they're not doing better than you academically, right? So you can see how frustrating that is, but they're getting all of the attention from your parents or from your family. So what that triggers is this feeling in you of, I have to kind of compete with my sibling for the attention and the recognition of my parents so that they can acknowledge me as the intelligent one. So you're working hard, working hard, working hard to prove that to yourself and to your parents, and you still don't get the recognition from your parents. So that feeds into this idea of I must not be intelligent because my parents are not acknowledging this. Or what I like to call competing against yourself. So in this situation, you are the one that's intelligent. You are the one that is superior. Your parents or your family members have made it clear that you are the one that is intelligent and very competent, with an emphasis on you've been able to accomplish things with little effort in your childhood. Okay, so now you make the association of, if I have to try hard for something, it must mean I'm not intelligent, because you have that understanding very early on that you're superior because you accomplish things with an ease, right? So now you're competing against yourself to uphold that image that your parents or your family members have of you, that you can accomplish things with ease. And the frightening part is that if you fail, then that's going to feed into this idea that you're not intelligent. Okay, because being intelligent means that you succeed at everything you do. And as we know, life doesn't happen that way. Okay, so that's one error that we learned and we see oftentimes. Something else that we learned is gender stereotypes. Okay, so we have this narrative that historically speaking, we've been told that men are innately superior, right? And that the norm is heteronormative, masculine, and white, right? And we have these myths about natural abilities when research and evidence shows that men and women are equally capable and competent of accomplishing so many things. And we have this assumption on gender roles, what it is to be feminine, what it is to be masculine, and who and when that's appropriate to act in that manner, right? So for women, it's appropriate to be feminine, meaning you can express your emotions, you can be nurturing, you're a good listener, and you take direction. Whereas masculinity, or being masculine, you are the leader. You don't need to ask for help because you have everything figured out. You don't show emotion. Okay, so there are discrepancies, even if you look at statistics when it comes to hiring and promoting. We know that out of 100 men that are hired or promoted to a manager or a supervisor, we have 72 women that are hired or promoted, and a total of 62% take up the percentage of men who, or people who have a managerial position, whereas 38% of women take up those positions in those roles. So there is a discrepancy, but we've learned that men experience this as well. It's just not talked about as much, again, because of this narrative that we're fed, right? So some of you may be familiar with the term toxic masculinity, which emphasizes manliness and macho-ness, right? And it kind of diminishes the importance of self-expression, expressing your emotions, asking for help, making a mistake. So what happens in this situation is we have men that even if they do make a mistake, they don't ask for help because it's looked down upon, right? So that in itself can stunt growth. And it's not productive, right? Because we understand the benefit and the growth that can come from acknowledging your mistakes. And even if you don't make a mistake, asking for help, right? So that's kind of something that still to this day is an issue. And we want the conversation to be speaking up instead of manning up. And then there are also some personality traits that we have learned that may precede the manifestation of the imposter phenomenon, right? So perfectionism, having to have things a certain way, having the order, having the structure, we can see how that can evolve into imposter phenomenon. And neuroticism, which people may describe as having a tendency to gravitate towards more quote unquote negative emotions. So you tend to be more irritable, more anxious, more prone to depressive episodes. And I think this is a very important part, a very important piece, which is the imposter phenomenon within marginalized communities. And by marginalized communities, I'm talking about racial and ethnic minorities and members of the LGBTQIA community, right? We've seen the negative effects that they've endured in terms of racism, homophobia, xenophobia, oppression, discrimination, microaggressions, right? Again, the narrative, when you find yourself in a space, and it doesn't even have to be something that's explicitly said to you that you don't belong, right? You kind of can just feel it when you're in a space and you're trying to show up, but you get that pushback because when you fall out of like any of those traits, heteronormative, masculine, white, which tends to be the norm, we can feel that discomfort. We can, there's this sense of that we don't belong because we don't check those boxes. And I've done a lot of reading on a lot of the work of Dr. Kevin Coakley, which he's a professor and he's a psychologist, and he studies a lot about identity development and racial development and African American psychology. And a lot of his work resonates with me for many reasons, right? Because there's another piece, right? There's the piece of what is the work that we can do within ourselves if we experience any, imposteristic beliefs or thoughts or feelings. How can I address it so that it doesn't impede opportunities or progress in the future? But there's another component of external factors that contribute to this, right? That can promote these feelings of imposterism within us. So one of the things that's very important, especially at the institutional level, is being able to foster a variety of leadership styles within the community, right? Which is why diversity is so important in terms of race, in terms of gender, in terms of religion. And also, if you are in a position where you're able to educate, okay, maybe you're an employer, maybe you are in charge of like promotions, right? Or even if it's just at home or within your family or with your partner, right? Being trained on how to speak up when you identify maybe any microaggressions going on, right? What does that look like? And how can I speak up to promote equality and to make those around me feel comfortable? If you are in a position where you can offer training to your staff, maybe consider, educating them on possibly what is critical race theory, what is gender racism, right? These are important conversations. And we do something like that here at Be.WELL, which I'm very grateful for. We have anti-racism training, which I think is so helpful because it allows us the space to have a conversation. And we get educated so that we can become better clinicians for our clients, right? For you all. Imposter phenomenon and mental health. Okay, so there is a misconception that this means you have a mental illness, right? So one of the reasons why the American Psychological Association has tried to gravitate away towards imposter syndrome is because sometimes it can be misleading in the sense that people hear the word syndrome and they make the association that this is a medical term, therefore it's a diagnosis, therefore it's a mental illness, right? So it's not a mental illness at all. It's very common, and it's not a diagnosis, right? This is not something that you'll find in the DSM-5, but we do see how if we don't kind of intervene or address these imposteristic beliefs, it can evolve into something that affects our mental health, right? Anxiety, depressive episodes or depressed mood, the doubt, the constant fear, the frustration, the low self-esteem. These are things that can manifest in so many different spaces and relationships in our life, right? Something as simple as a social gathering, where you may be there for networking, you may be there to mingle, to make some friends. Many people will look at that and say, this is a great opportunity. For people who struggle with this imposter phenomenon, it's a threatening opportunity, because this is just another situation where I can be exposed, where the spotlight is going to be on me and everyone's going to look at me and kind of pick me apart. And that exposure of they're going to see me for who I really am, right? Even though that's not really what's happening. Something like advocating for yourself, speaking up for yourself at work, in your relationship, right? When you're not treated with respect, with equality, that can be something that's very anxiety provoking because we doubt ourselves. Asking for a promotion, right? That's something that can trigger a lot of anxiety in a lot of us, but especially for people who struggle with this imposter phenomenon, because asking for a promotion or a raise, there tends to be this evaluation process, and you kind of have to talk about why you deserve that raise or why you deserve that promotion, right? And that means you kind of have to analyze your work and come up with a list of your accomplishments. And for people who struggle with this, coming up with a list of our accomplishments does not come easy to us, because we don't really think that we've accomplished much, or if we have accomplished things, we don't think that we've accomplished it because we're competent. It goes back to, we got lucky. It was just a circumstance of opportunity. So many different things that can be cut short because of the manifestation of this, okay? Which is why, if you are in a position to speak up, right, and have these conversations, even if it's just asking yourself, am I doing anything to contribute to the manifestation of this imposter phenomenon within my community? Okay, always checking yourself. That's very important. So some things that we can do to cope with the effects of imposterism. So bringing it back to us, there are a lot of tips and tricks that we can do that many people find helpful. The first one being acknowledge positives. Okay, this is very, very important because we tend to focus on the negatives. So even if it's something like starting your day with a positive affirmation, okay, or practicing positive self-talk, okay, because we tend to be our harshest critic, and you want to ask yourself, the way that I'm talking to myself about my capabilities, is this the same way that I would be talking to somebody else, to my friend? And chances are that's not, okay, because we tend to talk to ourselves in a harsh manner. So being positive, recognize the positives, identify the positives, try to make a more conscious effort to have that at the forefront of your mind. Being mindful of comparisons is so important. It's great to compare. If we're going to use maybe this person for motivation, or if this is the person that we aspire to be, but the minute you start comparing yourself to somebody else and you notice that you're feeling worse about yourself, you want to check that, because that's not going to be beneficial to us. The third one, this was something that I actually added after the podcast, because it was something that Anisha had mentioned. She says, I say yes to everything, okay, which is great, because what that means is if you say yes to these opportunities, right, you kind of have to show up, right? So there's no saying no. She says yes, and it kind of motivates her to show up and get things done and accomplish whatever it is that she needs to accomplish. If for you, if that's too much of a commitment to say yes, you don't have to say yes, but just don't say no, okay? If you're presented with an opportunity, you can say something like, thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. It sounds great. Let me get back to you by the end of the day, okay? And having that space and that time that can provide you an opportunity to clear your thoughts and think about it, and make sure that this is not another situation where you're going to turn something down because of that imposter phenomenon, right? Because you're doubting your capabilities. Expanding on strengths, I think, is very important, because we tend to ruminate and kind of become engulfed in the things that we can't do or the things that we're struggling with. Balance out your life with things that you're good at. balance out your life with things that you feel competent in, that you feel knowledgeable in. A growth mindset, okay? So kind of like I mentioned with the value of looking at things as an opportunity to grow, as opposed to an opportunity where people are going to see my flaws. Something that I like to do is adding yet to the end of the sentence, okay? So I don't know how to do this yet, okay? I don't know how to accomplish this yet. This is an opportunity to learn. A lot of us are going to find ourselves in situations for the first time, and you're not expected to, to have everything down pack 100%. So adding yet to the end of your sentence, identify positive role models, kind of tying into be mindful of comparisons, because having positive role models and people who you can look up to. For me, I love to look up to people who look like me, who have had similar experiences, because it gives me hope that if this person that I kind of put on a pedestal, if they have been able to accomplish all of this and they also struggle with feelings of doubt, it humanizes them in such a powerful way. And it lets me know that I can get to that level and I can still have doubts, and it's okay. It doesn't make me any less competent or worthy of success. Realistic expectations. Yeah, so kind of like I mentioned, realistic expectations, you're not going to know everything right away. So having a realistic expectation, if it's your first day on the job, first day in class, a first date, having realistic expectations is generally how that tends to go. We're still learning about the other person. We're learning about work duties. We're learning the curriculum. Risk being yourself and role play. These are two things that I do with my clients in therapy. So if you have a therapist, I 100% encourage you all to explore this with your therapist, but you can also give it a try on your own. Risk being yourself, which can be a bit intimidating, but basically what that means is with the imposter phenomenon, you feel like you're putting up this persona that's not you, right? That you are acting competent, that you're acting like you know what you're doing. So what would it look like if you take a day or time out of your day and you risk being yourself? You act out yourself. Okay, so which is why I say I like to work on this with my clients because it can take some practice, because it can be a bit intimidating for a lot of people. But risk being yourself, and the idea of risking being yourself is when we risk being ourselves and then we get the positive feedback, we no longer associate that with because I'm a imposter, right? I'm being myself. So we make that connection and that association of this positive feedback must be because they like me for who I am. Role playing is kind of like the opposite. Okay, so what I tell my clients is you amp it up, right? You think that you're an imposter and you're acting very intelligent, or you know what you're talking about, act it up, okay? 100%. And with the support of another person, what we tend to realize is that this perceived self, how they perceive themselves to be, which is very incompetent, versus the ideal self or what they're pretending to be, it's not that far apart. And then we have that aha moment. This is something that's completely attainable. I can completely, totally see myself there. It's not that far apart. It's not that unrealistic, right? And then the last part is share your feelings of inadequacy. And I think this is the most important tip out of all the tips that I've shared today, because there's power in speaking out. So you don't feel alone. Okay, you can speak out in a safe space, like in the presence of a therapist where it's confidential, or speaking out with those around you, with your family, with your friends, because studies say that 70% of people are going to experience this at some point in their lives. Okay, so chances are the people around you have experienced this or are experiencing this right now or will experience it. Okay, just because you struggle with these feelings, it does not make you any less of a person. It does not make you any less intelligent or competent or human, because we all go through this. And the last part of the wellness talk is basically how I hold space for my clients, how I show up in session. So I welcome all worldviews and I have a non-judgmental approach. Something that I always tell my clients is my job is not to judge your moral compass, right? My job is not to catch you in a lie. My job is not to interrogate you, grill you at all. I'm emotionally, mentally, and physically present. And I think now more than ever, as we're doing virtual sessions, although we're coming back into the office gradually, it's so important to be present and to be in tune with my clients and understand that I see you for who you are. So I provide that safe space for my clients where you can lean into your vulnerabilities, right? And therapy, for a lot of people, it can be very raw and real, uh, because in a way you are exposing yourself. And I know that's kind of the one of the main concerns of this imposter phenomenon. But when you're able to be exposed in a way that's safe and that you're not penalized for it and you're not criticized for it, then we have that kind of conversation of how can we take this healthy, positive relationship where you can be your authentic self and translate that into the real world. And I balance supporting you, challenging you, especially with this imposter phenomenon. We do a lot of challenging because we have a lot of distorted thoughts that are not realistic. Processing what's happening, what's going on, and reflecting. And a lot of that reflective work we see happens in between sessions, from week to week or during session. And if you can take one thing from this wellness talk, is that it is okay to not know what you're doing sometimes. We've all been there, and we're all going to have a first. And that concludes tonight's wellness talk. So if you have any questions, you can email us, you can text us, you can give us a call, check out our social media page. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, LinkedIn. We're also on YouTube if you look at Be.WELL Psychotherapy. And I am currently taking clients, okay? So I am available Tuesdays through Fridays, mornings, evenings. We'll work something out. I'm very flexible, okay? If anybody has any questions, I'm here. I would love to answer any questions that any of you may have. And I really hope this is something that can be educational. You're welcome, Liz. That's educational, that's informative, and my hope is that this can contribute to, again, that conversation of just normalizing this for everybody. And I think that's something that helps. When more people speak up, then it doesn't feel as much of a taboo. All right, Diana's trying to get back into the chat. So I would definitely recommend, if any of you have experienced anything like this or have friends or family, take that quick little questionnaire and check it out. It's free, no pressure, and I think it can be something that's very insightful. All right, I'm going to close out the slideshow while we wait for Diana. Okay. I'm also on Instagram if you want to follow me. Suhaili Nunez is my kind of name on Instagram. Yes, thank you all so much for showing up. Diana, thanks you all as well. Yeah, it happens. So she's having some technical issues. But thank you all so much. Please feel free to reach out, contact us, give us a call, email, YouTube, and then hopefully I will be seeing some of you in the future, whether in a similar setting or in another aspect of Be.WELL. You're welcome, Maria. Adios. Que pasen buena noche. Thank you so much, everyone.